On the Build Show today, we're talking basement insulation. Now, if you're building new or remodeling, there's two areas that are critical to insulate in your basement. That's your walls in the basement, but also don't forget about your slab area. Now, if you're in a northern climate, it's cold and you're trying to heat your house, but you're losing actually a ton of heat through that basement slab. So in today's video, we're gonna talk about both wall insulation and insulating that slab. Let's get going. Hey guys, insulation quick tip today. I want to talk to you about basement insulation. Now, you've seen Steve Baczek before. We've toured some of his job sites. We're on a shoreline builder's job, and I thought this insulation strategy for this basement, which I don't have a lot of in Texas, is genius. Will you tell us what's going on here, Steve?
Yeah, so what we did basically is we did our framed wall because it's going to be a finished walkout space. We held our inside of our frame off the concrete wall about 1.5 inches, which enables us to spray our 2 inches of closed cell and basically get around the backside of that frame. So we have a thermally broken full insulation wall system along here that we can then run outlets and wiring and do our traditional work. And the beauty of the system is if we want to upgrade the insulation value even further, we can throw an unfaced bad in on the inside face of this air-sealed cavity, and it'll perform exceptionally well.
And why closed cell, Steve, compared to open cell foam or bad insulation even in here?
So the closed cell does a couple things. One, it's a higher R value, but it warms that condensing surface of the foundation.
There you go.
So that if we have any issues with moisture migration into this wall system, that the real surface, the condensation surface, is the face of the foam, not the face of the concrete.
Yep.
So that we're limiting our risk there from a condensation perspective.
And at approximately R7 per inch, we've got, R14, R15 already in this cavity.
Yeah.
And this would work in just about any climate zone in America, right?
Work in any climate zone in America. It enhances our air tightness spec. We have it climb right up into the band joist. So basically it connects our floor slab right to our subfloor.
Man, that's awesome, Steve. Guys, more information on Steve, there'll be a link in the description below for his website. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show. Quick commercial break here. Isn't Steve awesome? We're going to talk about basement slab insulation, but I want to tell you quickly about our show sponsor for today's episode, Audible. If you don't know these guys, you should check out their website. So many audio titles, and on my trip to Boston last week, I re-listened to a title that's made a huge impact on my business called The New Rules of Marketing and PR by David Meerman Scott. I listened to this originally like 10 years ago, and that's actually what got me started on YouTube. And here I am 10 years later, 200,000 subscribers. It's been a huge rocket to boost my business. You should definitely check out that book. If you're interested in Audible, you can get a 30-day free trial, including one free download on a book. All you got to do is go to audible.com/Matt Reisinger or text Matt Reisinger to 500-500. Again, 30-day free trial, you get one free book. All you got to do is go to audible.com/Matt Reisinger or text Matt Reisinger to 500-500. Let's get back to Steve again. I wanted to talk to you today about slab insulation. So Steve, before we show the assembly and what you've done here, why is it important to insulate your basement slab if you're in the northern climates?
So, well, any climate, it's the same as air tightness. I liken it to air tightness. Joe always says you can draw a red line. Well, when it comes to thermal performance, we need to draw that green line around the house. It needs to be continuous and it needs to be connected all the way around the house.
Yep. So we're decoupling the house thermally from the ground below, right?
Yes, sir.
The ground temp is what in this area?
55 degrees plus or minus. So there's only a 15-degree delta, so it's not like an exposed foundation wall,
right,
but it's still a heat loss.
Yeah. Okay, so then tell me how you do that. I've not done this before in the south at this location. So tell me the assembly that you got, Steve.
And before we get into the assembly, one quick point though to point out. It's probably one of the only places where you don't get a second chance to insulate.
Boy, that's for sure.
Right? So it's important in that regard.
You're never going to remodel your basement slab.
You're never going to remodel the basement slab. And in New England, we have a history of 200, 100-year-old, 50-year-old houses that have uninsulated slab basements that people are trying to finish.
Right.
So it's really important that in the places where we can't change, we get it right the first time.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so first, before you say that though, we're in a full in-ground foundation. We're outside of Boston. So behind this closed cell foam, we've got concrete foundation walls, which are taking the load of the house. And then under our feet here looks like a typical basement slab, a 4-inch pour for a basement slab. This is not structural what we're on. These walls here are just partition walls. Okay, take it from there then, Steve. What are we looking at?
What we have coming up from the bottom, we have our compacted grade existing ground contact there. We pour typically about 10 inches of stone on the inside. It's a 3/4 inch drainable stone that we have a perimeter drain running around.
Okay.
So that's kind of a hydro break to the slab. So the slab should never get challenged with water.
Yeah.
That the water's going to whisk it away. On top of the stone gets leveled. We have 4 inches in two 2-inch layers of type 9 EPS. The type 9 EPS is one that's rated for ground contact.
Okay, so EPS looks like your styrofoam cup that you might get at Dunkin' Donuts, but this is a special type of EPS, right?
It's a special type, and I think it has about a 25 PSI rating, so it's not going to crush. It's going to totally handle the job it needs to do here. On top of the 4 inches of foam, we have a 10 mil poly that we run across the whole top, and that's serving kind of a short-term and a long-term purpose. For the short term, it prevents the iceberging of the insulation when the concrete slab gets poured. If there's any cracks around it and that foam goes buoyant, you're in trouble real quick.
So if we put the poly down on top of the rock and then put the foam down and poured concrete on it, if that concrete were to get underneath that foam, whoop, it would rise to the surface.
It would rise
right?
to the surface, and I call it iceberging.
Yeah, you're gonna jackhammer that out later.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
So by putting the poly on top of the foam, we use the weight of the concrete to hold the foam in place.
That makes sense.
And we can't get around it. And for the long term, any moisture that does migrate through the stones and migrate up through the EPS foam, then the poly's our last defense from stopping that moisture to get in.
Gotcha. So how do we terminate that poly on these foundation walls? The walls are in first before we're pouring this slab. So how do we terminate that poly?
Yeah, so as the poly comes across the wall, before these walls gets framed, it gets turned up the wall about 18 inches, and then it's just simply taped to the wall and then gets sealed behind the closed cell foam.
That makes sense.
So it just gets buried into the system.
Yeah, and that closed cell foam is going to glue it there, and it's going to
glue it and
stop
hold it
any
into
moisture
place.
from coming through.
Exactly.
Man, Steve, so cool to see these details. I read your articles on JLC, I read your articles in Fine Home Building, but to see one of your houses live, this is impressive stuff, guys. To learn more about Steve, I'll put a link in the description to his website. He's an architect who works all over the U.S., but is based here in Boston. Big thanks to Jim, the builder over here too. Jim's doing an incredible job on this job. Tell me, Steve, you know Jim's website?
Shorelinebuilders.net. And thanks to all of Jim's guys, all talented professionals.
Talented people. Thank you, Jim, for letting us invade your job site today. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.